You're listening to The Big Lift, the podcast of WebTrends Optimize, the CRO solution that enables marketers and developers to maximize the ROI on their digital properties. WebTrends Optimize is a powerful, feature-rich and easy-to-use solution, all delivered within a fixed-price contract with no additional cost for increased functionality ever. During these podcasts, we meet some of the key influencers within the marketing and conversion world to understand their roles and examine their challenges. This episode is one that's very close to my heart, as I feel that many companies are spending a disproportionate percentage of their marketing budgets on paid advertising without really understanding the true cost. So today I'm in discussion with Jason Smith, Vice President UK and Europe at MoEngage. Jason has decades of strategic experience across many different sectors and recognises the significance of gaining and, as importantly, retaining valuable customers. We discuss that businesses must understand that customer acquisition is only the beginning of the process and that more emphasis should be placed on making profitable, repeatable sales than gaining one-time loss-making customers. Jason, as we'll be discussing customer strategy today, could you give our listeners a brief background of your career history?
Absolutely, John. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me today. So, my background, even though I operate in a commercial role today, I started off as a data software engineer, strangely enough. So, I guess I'm a sort of kind of a closet data geek at the heart. Then spent many years working with managing teams in a technical capacity, then working for the dark art of Google and Facebook for many years before I crossed over to the product side. Mm-hmm. So I was more interested about what things did commercially as opposed to how to build them. There was always better coders out there than me in the world. So I've come from that sort of kind of data analytics background, technology development side into the more product space where I am at the moment, which is MoEngage.
Looking at your LinkedIn profile, I take it that you've been at the forefront of C-level engagement. And in your experience, do those kind of level of people get customer experience?
I would say complete and extremes of the spectrum. There's many businesses that do. So I would say the businesses that grow quite aggressively are the board level, which are very in tune around data and what's working, what's not. Whereas I say there's quite a few legacy businesses which do the same thing that I've done for years and don't feel they have to change. However, we're seeing plenty of those disappear off the high street. So perhaps which is right, which is wrong.
Yeah, I think it's quite opportune because there have been so many kind of companies that have fallen by the wayside, predominantly those that are more high street focused, and they haven't moved online fast enough, or they're not having a great customer experience. And it just kind of pulls things together to say, actually, the customer has got a voice and it's starting to use it day by day by day. And if you're not listening to what that is, then you better get out of doing what you're doing, because obviously the customer has a great level of leverage to be able to go forward one way or another. And a lot of them are moving towards online, and many of the companies that have fallen by the wayside haven't really gone online fast enough, I don't think.
Absolutely. I see it's the three elements. It always used to be about product and price.
Yeah.
Now, customer experience is the third element to that triangle that's come in. And that's very much important about even, if they're ordering online or the experience in store or they're, it's that joined up experience where a lot of businesses don't tend to evolve into. Mm-hmm. And if they stay just about product and price, they're the ones that we seem to fail because they're not stitching that sort of kind of more new age customer experience together.
I kind of add to that. It's that there are a lot of customers that are more focused on customer acquisition than customer retention. And yes. I would say if you look at the broad aspect of things, everybody's spending lots and lots of money on AdWords, PPC, or whatever you want to call it. And they're not necessarily understanding the true cost of that. And now I'm just going to give you a little example, and bear with me while I work through this. So PPC cost is approximately £1 per click. That's some stats I've got off the web recently. So it's between $2 to $4. Say, for instance, a marketing team spends £20,000 on AdWords, which is about 20,000 clicks at £1 a click. The average conversion rate to actually buying something is about 3%. So that means that you would get approximately 600 purchases out of your £20,000 worth of clicks. Now, looking at that, if a customer only spends £100, and that's quite a high value as a notional value, if you work that out, the revenue that comes in from that is £100 times 600, which is £60,000.
Sure.
Now, most companies work on a profit margin, I don't know, between 20 and maybe 50%. But let's say that's 30%, and let's be so their costs are around £70 of that £100. So if you multiply that 30%, that's 60,000, 30%, that's £18,000. So they spent £20,000, and yet they're not making any money. They're losing £2,000. Now, I'm a pretty lay person, but I'm kind of thinking that can't continue. And do you think that's a way that companies are focusing too much on customer acquisition?
100%. And that's a really interesting topic. So as part of our analytics pattern, the whole idea is for us to look at acquisition costs, customer lifetime value. And when I say true customer lifetime value, because the elements you're talking about there, it's where you've looked at things, you factor in returns. I know something that, for example, like Next, they've got a 60% return rate. So people might buy, say 10 items, but if they're returning 6 out of 10, then the value of that customer isn't quite as high as you think it is.
Yeah, because I think the average return rate, from what I was looking up, is about 18%, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. And there's a repackaging cost, there's a reselling cost, and all those sort of things. So I mean, all those elements aren't generally considered. But the numbers you're talking about there are definitely what I call vanity rather than sanity metrics.
Yeah.
So vanity is we've spent £20,000 effectively, and we've got 20,000 new customers. Because we've had clicks on those ads. So as far as the acquisition teams are going, everybody's high-fiving and celebrating, great success. But if you then go filter down, if you unpeel it like an onion to a certain extent and go down further and further and further, and actually realize that out of those 20,000 customers or 20,000 clicks, you've got, say 10,000 of bargain hunters that just kind of come in, one purchase and never see them again. You've got X amount of people who just bounce. You've got another 50% which bounce. And actually out of that, there's only a very core key of customers that you then take through to retention and loyalty and becoming very brand loyal. So it's that whole kind of funnel as you move down. But I would say 80% of businesses don't look at it, or don't want to look at it, I think is the best way to probably put it.
I like that phrase, vanity rather than sanity. I think that's quite clear, because if you look at marketing teams that are into acquisition, they're definitely about the stats showing that they're doing something good. We've won this many customers, we've won this many sales, this is our conversion rate.
Correct.
But actually, if you knit the whole thing together, when you take into account the costs, and based on some costs at 18%, I think they'd, instead of losing £2,000 on their 20,000, they'd actually be losing around 5,200 on that. So how come that isn't being brought into the mix when it comes to being able to, say, paying these guys, for instance? Because they're being paid bonuses potentially on their conversion rates, and yet the company isn't making money, it's losing money at the end of it. So are the accountants not coming back to the marketing director and saying, actually, guys, this doesn't seem to make sense? Or is that just something that nobody's joined the dots up?
I would like to say yes, but in reality, no. So I think around the incentives, we've all worked at organisations where they've had misaligned OKRs. This is a classic case in especially e-com, retail, which I would say is probably one of the worst ones. I remember doing a project a few years ago with a very large fashion group that's no longer around, beginning with A and ending in A, and they had various different sort of brands within it. And they saw their acquisition as two buckets. They had their addressable market, so they used to bombard emails at sort of, if we say like peak times by 3-4 a day. Their only target was a conversion number of overall sales. So they had to achieve X amount of million per day or per hour as their sort of kind of target. Now, if that number was waning in any shape or form, they just threw more money into PPC to drive more traffic and more conversions. So or they discounted more. So the reality, it was let's see it. They approached marketing strategy like a flash sale, which is fine, but if you want, in the cool calm of day, when you look at all the metrics that you've been discussing here about, okay, so did that actually overall work for us? It might have filled the bucket of lots of sales, but then they used to see the bucket. They said, because the code name is the bucket's got holes.
Yeah.
So if the bucket had holes, they would just throw another £100,000 of PPC to try and make sure the bucket kept full, to make sure we hit those sales numbers. But overall, they were not interested to understand about how many of those customers went on to purchase the second time, the third time outside of sale, or did they become a loyal, retained customer, and what was their long-term customer lifetime value over 12 months, for example. No metrics aligned for that at all. They used to do projects once a quarter and pull out a segment, but it was a very ad hoc. It wasn't part of the day-to-day strategy.
Are you saying then that the majority of organisations are not attributing real costs and looking from soup to nuts, as the Americans would call it, with regard to a particular phase? That must mean that we're heading for another kind of crash where companies are following the vanity route and not seeing the sanity route. And when it comes to refinancing or whatever they will have to do at some point in time, they're just not going to make, the numbers aren't going to make sense, surely.
Well, I think that's probably why you've seen so many businesses fail over the last few years that everybody thought were very established. I mean, I spent many years at Groupon, so started there in the early days, and that was a offer-based promotions engine, as I see it. It's just a Groupon. Yes, they sold products and everything, but if we look at our acquisition, they started off. It was called the Tipping Point. I'm not sure if you're aware of it before it's called Groupon, but it was all about the tipping point before it came live. But it was a business that started off very well. It was very well funded, and sometimes cash can be dangerous. So we had a lot of people pumping a lot of money into PPC, and it wasn't until you sort of kind of sat back and looked at analysing those customers and actually saying, are we actually attracting the right customer? Or are we just attracting a person that just wants a bargain for today, and they'll go to another site tomorrow for another bargain and off that sort of side? So we developed all these personas of customer value pockets, and we looked at it and we structured it, and we actually strategized around our PPC campaigns. So we actually then put more of the budget into finding loyal and bigger spenders, rather than just the people who are just going to I want to go out for a meal tonight. Who's got discounts? And just clicked on that and never came back. So there's very few companies that do it. I think they do look at the overall figures, but I don't think it filters down to the operational lines that are doing these things on a day-to-day basis.
But if you kind of think that you're doing something wrong for long enough, it's going to end in disaster. This seems to be something that isn't being overtly discussed by any means, with regard to the cost of acquisition being way over the cost of retention, not just in the fact that it costs less to be able to keep a customer than it does to be able to acquire a new customer. But it just seems that because this isn't a joined up connection between the accounts department right the way through to the marketing department, that someone somewhere has to start educating people to make this happen. Because I hark back to the days of the late 1990s, the 2000s. We all believed that the dot-com industry was the new world.
Yeah.
And valuations on companies were just insane, based upon the fact that this could be, would be, or may be this super-duper company in 10 years' time. And it all fell apart, around the 2000s. I was part of it. So it all kind of fell apart at that time. But I think that we're into this situation where everybody believes acquisition is king. And I'm just trying to wonder, what can we do as educators in this space, go after and say, actually, we ought to be talking about this true cost of acquisition more loudly, more overtly, when we're talking about marketing. When you look at the ad spend versus the retention spend, ad spend is probably 10, 15, even 20 times greater than retention spend.
Sure.
And yet the profitability is in the customer's second and third and fourth and fifth purchase. But it's just, how do we go about changing the attitude of people?
I remember I did a talk in the US going back a couple of years ago, and it was high-level digital directors of some fairly large businesses. And I said, look, show your hands. Who on the board owns loyalty? And it was only Ford Motor Cars was the only person that put their hand up. Yeah. They were the only person on the board that actually had actually had loyalty at a board level ownership.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great sentiment to understand how we do it. So yeah, when some businesses launch, it's about acquisition and eyeballs and early customers, and that drives early funding, and they can move on from that. So I get that.
But at some point, it's got to change. I spend a lot of time talking about PPC and is it actually working to businesses. Having worked for Facebook and Google for many years, the honest answer is they don't want you to know what is actually working. They just want you to spend more money. So that whole double attribution problem, which it's probably a conversation for a different time.
Yes, possibly.
But the reality is, when you're looking at holistically at your campaigns and understanding, look, this is we've invested X into a campaign. Has it materialised the right benefits from us? That's the way we should look at it. We're analysing the uplift. What are those customers have gone on to do? What's the basket size and everything? And what's the next action? I think that's where people don't leverage insights as much. People do orchestration. They send campaigns and they look at click rates on 1,000 emails and say, are those 1,000 emails, 15% click through, 5% when purchased on an offer. That's about as far as they go, but there's more to than that. And that's where I think the data-driven decisioning and business decisions need to really take sort of kind of prowess effectively.
Do you think we ought to be starting to do this earlier on in the evolution of the next level of marketers? So those that are coming into university to do maybe their certification of marketing or something like that, and being able to start to talk to them about the true cost of marketing is not just front-ended. It's actually going all the way through to the end, because I'm not going to name names, but some of the people that I talk to just don't have a clue of the back-end part of the business.
Yep.
They're absolutely focused on the front end. And I have to say, the people in the accounts department probably aren't focused on the front end of the business. But I think we've got to go and find a way of being able to get these new marketers that are coming out of university with their marketing degrees, believing that they know everything, to actually think more about the business of business as opposed to just the marketing of the business. Do you think that would help?
Yeah, and I think the fundamental problem is most CMOs that sit over these departments are self-taught.
Yeah.
And they're self-taught, and they learn off other people. Their CMO, when they were starting out, and they were self-taught. So they only know what they know, and they don't know what they don't know, is the honest answer. So it's a way that served the business, and especially e-com, retail and sort of stuff for many years. We're starting to have data insight teams. If we don't get distracted with ChatGPT and everything else as well, we can focus on some insight. And occasionally they'll pull segments and stuff as well, but it's very then hard for them to push that into the day-to-day usage. And I think these decisions that should be utilised on a day-to-day basis when they're executing campaigns. For example, vouchers and loyalty is something that's come up hugely now, to try and help with retention, and there's lots of campaigns and coupons that nearly every business has jumped on, some sort of kind of loyalty card of some kind.
Yep.
But not everybody needs 20%. Some people need 10%, some people need 30%. It's about cannibalizing the margin as well. So, all these things need to be taken into account when we look at the true value of this customer's bringing to us. And if they're not a good customer, sometimes to say no. There's a segment of customers that we don't want to market with a 40% offer because they're going to buy it and send it back, and it's actually going to cost us money.
Yeah.
So don't do it. That takes a very brave person. Having done that to a couple of board CEOs about identifying segments that we should market, once we got through the initial shouting match of them saying that's ridiculous, we shouldn't, we should never not mail to anybody. Eventually they understand it when you talk about these metrics. So they do get it, they do understand it. But I think there's a massive educational road that we need to go on to become adopted behaviour within businesses. I think that's the challenge.
So when you're talking to many of these senior people and you talk about customer acquisition versus customer retention, they presumably get it in the theoretical point, but don't necessarily get the other people involved which are further down the chain, which are actually so point focused. In other words, they've got a job to do, they're given their tasks, and they go off to do their tasks to the best of their ability to meet the goals that they've been given. So do you think it's the CMO's responsibility to be able to start thinking about, actually, we shouldn't be emailing 40% offers to those people that sent more than 3 things back in the last 12 months?
Yes, yeah. They should be driving the strategy across the teams. and asking the relevant questions. And that's, it's something around, there's a particular exercise I do where I go into boards and educate them about, retention and acquisition and loyalty and what makes good business. And they all agree at a board level, and they think this is absolutely what we need to do, and we're doing it. But the reality is they think they're doing it, but they're not doing it. And just because they've got a loyalty program in place, which they've launched, that solves their retention, doesn't it? I mean, why do anything else? That's just solved it. We've got a loyalty program. So that helps on retention. So all these things, is it working? Is the paid advertising working? The campaigns, because, most of these big organizations will use agencies for their PPC side. They get a percentage of whatever the business spends. So why are they going to go, no, we should cut back on advertising, we should cut back on PPC? They're going to say, no, you need a bigger number, let's spend more. So you've got, and hence why Facebook and Google are worth the amount they are. So it's an interesting world of a spiral of, behavior that, doesn't need to change. But if you look at the cold data, exactly. But if you look at the cold data, everything you said doesn't make business sense to do it. So it's changing that and going, okay, that does make sense. But most importantly is the next thing is like, well, what else do we do? So if we're not going to market this particular segment, we need to be able to identify the other segments that we should focus on more to drive bigger basket value. So it's not a case of like, let's not do that because that doesn't work. You have to have this sort of kind of backup strategy of what else we should do to help drive the more revenue. I mean, we all know retained customers spend more, but having that, then the retention strategy that's robust is the important thing.
Yeah, and that's always difficult to measure currently. I think that there'll be more things along to be able to make that happen. But people can easily see clicks versus new customers, and it's an easy strategy for most marketers to be able to say, hey, I've done a great job being able to make this happen. But actually, if I go back to the fundamentals of we're spending lots of money which isn't necessarily making money, how do we convince the people who are spending lots of money that they should spend some of that bucket of PPC into doing more testing or more customer experience surveys and things like that? That's a difficult challenge because they are such point-centric people, aren't they?
Yeah, and that comes back to the behavior breeds behavior type scenario. You've got to change that behavior. But you'd be absolutely right. If you approached your marketing strategy as a bench test and just purely looked at the numbers, if you're running at a laboratory, for example, it'd be very measured, controlled, executed. Sometimes it's not like that because they've done it a certain way for many years and other people did it at a certain organisation that worked and vice versa. So you're absolutely right. Looking at those segments, understanding what's working. Also, most importantly, looking after things like, it's not just PPC, but it's drop-off rates where A/B testing comes in is really important. Are we creating the best first experience from, I've clicked on this ad, I've landed on the website, is this have I got any drop-off rates around this? Is this the best experience it could possibly be? And this is what we spoke about right at the start about the customer experience or the customer expectation, from that as well. We're making those assumptions straight away. It's not just about product and price necessarily. And the people that are focused about just product and price don't tend to be your biggest spenders. I think ASOS did some research many, many years ago, and they said anybody that clicks on coming soon rather than sale items is worth 60% more value to them as a business than the people click on sale, because they want to see what's there. They're investing in the future. They're looking at what's coming up soon and what new arrivals are, which are full price. So they then looked at reverse engineering by looking at their paid campaigns and understanding, saying, okay, well, we want more of these people because these are the spenders that just don't want discounts. So that's a strategy change, a mindset change, and that's what businesses need to go through. They need to go through their own mindset transformation, I think, to a certain extent. But if you haven't got the data to make those decisions at the fundamental point, then it all fails. And that's where a lot of businesses struggle with siloed data across departments, different expectations, different goal setting. It doesn't come together as one sort of kind of data set.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, customer retention is a great thing, especially new customer retention is a great thing. And I think I do a lot of web browsing like most people, and there's numerous amounts of companies that fill in your details and will give you a second purchase discount. or 50. They word it 15% off your next purchase. Now, at that point, it's usually within 5 seconds of you landing on the site, maybe 10 seconds if you're lucky.
Yep.
But that should, just by moving that to when you're filling up your basket and just about to press click, that bit there says, I'll give you money off your next purchase, should be a way of being able to encourage people to then buy again. It's like getting a voucher in a shop. As you've spent your goods, you go back and do it again. But I think the timing of some of these things just seems to be at odds. And I know they're trying to capture people's emails so they can market to them at the first instance.
Yep.
And that's about customer acquisition. The customer retention is being able to offer them something that they think is of value. Now, I quote Charles White, the shirt people.
Yeah, Tewett. Yeah, Charles Tewett.
Tewett. They have a fantastic bit on the top of their website, I don't know if it's still there, that says, whatever the reason, if you don't like the shirt that you've bought, send it back and we'll give you your money back.
Yeah.
Up to 6 months. Now, that's the first thing that I think of customer retention. Wow, that's hit me straight between the eyeballs of, yes, I'm going to continue to buy with this customer. And yet, there are so few people doing things like that to be able to make sure that they're actually getting customers to come back and revisit and spend a little bit more. And we don't all need to be bombarded by emails. We just need to have the right email at the right time to be able to make sure that we still have an interest in that. But I think marketers are all about, there's a lot of push, and there's not a lot of pull. How do we get more out of this customer? Well, that's how it seems to me.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. And it's being a sort of kind of data junkie like myself, it's just that it goes to the next level. So if you look at sort of kind of fast fashion sort of concept, and that's a very dynamic market space. I mean, there's a lot of strong brands and sort of stuff out there, and that fast fashion sort of kind of targeting a very sort of kind of certain demographic of customer that just wants it now. Black dress tonight. If you haven't got it, I'll go somewhere else. And then I'm only spending £30 and wear it once or twice. That's a really competitive space. But there's certain staple items within that. For example, jeans. If you buy jeans from a brand, you're loyal. You actually buy those jeans, brand of jeans, for years normally. Yeah. But you'll buy your socks from anywhere. But so it's that acquisition sort of side. So it's a bit like banking. If you can drive, you can get credit card anywhere from BFSI. But if you can get current accounts, then that becomes sticky and loyal and retained. But you may not want to move everything your current account from day one. You might start with another product, like a savings plan or a credit card first, and then migrate. So it's understanding all the moving parts within it and the products for retention and there as well. Not just because, great, we've got somebody signed up for a credit card, everybody's done a great job from a paid advertising and that's it, it's done. It's about that longer term strategic plan. I think that's where a lot of businesses fail at. Don't do effectively enough, and they don't have that longer term strategy aspect of it. So understand the different products, but again, I revert everything back to the data. The data's there. It's about interrogating it the right way and understanding. Okay, if somebody buys this product, what do they go on and buy next? And then driving people down particular funnels or paths to make sure that you drive towards retention. So you've acquired them, you've spent your money. How can I best retain them? And, it's not just about discounts sometimes. It's about, moving them to the right sort of kind of product. So the next purchase is a certain product they recommended, because once they buy that, then they become a little bit sticky. Or if it's buying a certain amount of products in a certain amount of time, becomes evidence or data shows you that if they buy 3 products in the first 6 weeks, that they tend to be with you for a year. So whatever the business data is around, it's about interrogating and understanding that, and then building campaign flows and engagement strategies around that as well.
The one question that this whole conversation is going to end up on is, how can we help marketers to think differently? Or are we talking about a lost cause? Because it's got to change somehow or the other. And having been in sales for half my life, I was very much of the champion inside an organisation. Get a champion inside the organisation. Do you think that's a conversation that people like yourselves and company like ours should be talking to those champions about the different ways that actually they're spending money, so that champion becomes more vocal inside the organisation? Or do you think there are other methods?
Absolutely. So the art of the possible, and I begin to sound like my child slightly, or children slightly, but when somebody says, "But why? But why are you doing that? But why?" Trying to get them to understand the metrics. But it's a light bulb moment. Once you can get a business to understand and interrogate the data correctly, and sometimes that's showing them the data, and then they're going, wow, this is amazing. And then again, back to the retention thing, but then making sure that they adopt that data in every single action they do, then there's no, we go into lots of businesses, especially mobile first businesses that have come from, they haven't had the legacy bricks and mortar things. They've just gone straight to, mobile first apps in a very competitive space. And, one of the things that what makes them very good and growing from, like, say, 1 million monthly active users to 175 million monthly active users in the world in a very short amount of time. It's data decisioning. They're personaing everything. They're understanding that different, going down to the app experience is different to a 17-year-old, different to a 70-year-old in this particular case, one of our customers. And, have quite a wide demographic, but the language is different. The experience is different. The way they're talking to them, the language and everything. So they're basically, that's helping with their retention strategy and making sure that, for example, hey, no surprise, the 20-year-olds that we've got aren't opening emails because they don't, but they're using different communication strategies for them around, using in-app pushes where, some of the older people are opening the emails. So it's having that combined strategy, but fundamentally the data layer below it, the data is helping them make those decisions. So businesses, once they can see it and visualize it, and most importantly, access it easily with a good system, then the adoption comes. And the biggest problem that people have at the moment, I guess, is accessing that data, through their systems and stuff they're using, and be able to adopt that without relying on our analytics team to come up with this amazing cohort once a quarter. They try and bring it into the strategy, but then they revert back to what they know because they've got to do something else for the rest of the quarter. So it's about changing that behavior. But to do that, they have to see the light and see the change as well. And then, it's great to see people going on that journey.
One of the things, and I'm not sure whether it is or was out of the box with Google Analytics, is there should be a way of being able to attribute second and third purchases to a particular campaign that happened in the first instance.
They don't want you to. The honest answer. They don't want you to. Simple as that. They want to keep you, keep spending and sort of stuff there as well. But you would think it makes sense. It's one of the things we do. We spend a lot of time with customers about lookalike audiences, and we take good customer journeys through and go, okay, this customer is a high customer lifetime value, like example a Groupon is like, or whatever things. This segment of customers are big spenders. So let's find more people like this segment in our paid advertising and only target them. Normally they don't like you to do that because it limits their choice and everything else as well, and they just prefer to go the big batch type strategy. But it kind of makes business sense. Back to what you were saying at the start, if you look at it through eyes, it all makes sense. But if you can just access that data and understand who you are, your customers, and then pull that into your paid advertising, then it makes sense. And then you can see these great customers coming in again. Then it makes sense. But it's that adoption and access to data which is the fundamental problem.
Jason, it's been a fascinating half hour or so. I think that this is one of my bugbears, so I think I'll be becoming much more vocal about it, because I think there just aren't enough people that are thinking the same way with regard to how they spend the money on acquisition. And obviously from our perspective, we want more people to be utilising CRO and A/B testing to be able to prove their hypotheses. But from my point of view, I think what I hear from you, you've got a great passion about this as well. So hopefully the two of us will start a revolution and we'll make things change. But I'd like to pick it up maybe in a year or so's time to see if anything has changed, because I think it's one of those things that it has to move somewhere along the line, and it's not going to continue the way it is because businesses are falling by the wayside. So, Jason, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure we'll speak again.
Thank you, John. My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.